Hi guys, so I wanted to do this video today kind of talking about, it's kind of piggybacking on my other videos that are on my channel, and if you have not watched them, I'll give you a brief kind of like synopsis. So basically on my channel, I'm talking about going and getting my licensure to become a clinical mental health counselor, and my primary demographic focus is on the Black community. So with that being said, for some reason, some people like to troll anything that is pro-Black channels on YouTube or any other social media as if being pro-Black is anti anything else. This is just a news flash to you. When somebody says that they're focusing on their own community, it is not up to you to negate it or say that they're being racist because they don't want to focus on your community or other communities as a collective. Clearly, the people that are trolling my video and other people that make similar videos fail to understand and completely are misguided on what it is to be any type of clinician. When you are working as a clinician, you actually have to focus on a particular demographic in order to focus on it, understand the cultural aspects of that demographic that you're focusing on, and making sure that you're not causing harm, but actually helping that community. And by doing that, you must be able to focus, do your due diligence, and really understand the community that you are wanting to serve. So I am an African American female and raised by an African American female, and my whole focus is on my community. The Black community as a whole is hurting, and we need to come together as a collective, and we really need to rise above a lot of the things that are happening to us and by us. So with that being said, anybody that has an issue with that on my channel, please find your way to block yourself or you will be blocked. I'm not interested in anything that you have to say. This channel is not for you. It was not created for you. And if you're that sensitive, perhaps you should seek some help for yourself as well, because perhaps you are suffering from some type of mental illness in which you need to seek treatment for. But I am not your mental health counselor, and this is not your channel. So please separate yourself. With that being said, moving forward, I really wanted to say that it's important that in this field that we actually focus on the demographics that we want to work with. If you are a person that belongs to the LGBTQ community and that is what you're passionate about, please make sure that while you are in school that is your focus. It is really easy to get lost in the shuffle when you are learning to be a clinician, and you have to learn about other cultures and other demographics and classes and sexes and genders. It's really easy to get swept up in it all and not really focus on what your primary reason was for entering into this field. If you set out and you only strictly want to deal with children, then make sure you are going outside of your academic curriculum and making sure that you are finding other reading material, because your school can only basically do surface touches on specific demographics. I know one girl, and she really wants to focus on an area. She's in Alaska, and so she wants to focus primarily on the people that are in her area. That's not an issue, but there always seems to be some type of issue when a Black person says that they want to focus on the Black community, as if that's something that's racist. It's not racist to sit here and say that you only want to focus on the demographic of people that you feel like need the most help. And so in order for me to feel like I am doing my part and aiding in the rise of my community, my focus will continue to be on helping the individuals that are suffering in my community. I'm not going to deviate from that. I'm not going to be bullied to believe that I need to focus on a collective. For the people that take issue with that, I hope you go to every cancer event and say that everybody should focus on sickle cell anemia. There you go. If you always feel like you have to tell somebody that they need to refocus their position in life in order to suit you and make you feel comfortable, that's something you need to look within yourself. That is not something that the other person has to change. And to be perfectly honest, that is very narcissistic to sit here and think that everybody must focus on you or we must focus in generalities. To be perfectly honest with you, nobody sits in these fields and is focused on a general demographic. We are focused on a specific demographics, and yes, we touch on other demographics that are not our specific demographic, but we do focus on what we are wanting to set out into the field to do. So with that being said, you need to make sure that when you are doing your interning or your practicum, that you're really looking for these different hospitals, these clinics, these these treatment facilities, these residential or outpatient treatment facilities, and really focusing on your demographic. I am going to be searching for any place in my community that focuses on the African American youth and young adults. I really feel like that is where I need to focus my attention on. If you feel like your primary focus is on the LGBTQ community, then that needs to be your primary focus. You cannot tell somebody that they cannot focus on a specific demographic. That's just ridiculous. That's not the way this field works. That's not the way any field works. When you think about it, when you have teachers and they're saying that they want to focus on children K through 5 and they want to work in inner city schools, are you going to tell that teacher, well, that's ridiculous. You need to focus on all grades, and you need to also focus on the suburbs and the rural areas too. No, you're not going to say that. But for some reason, when it comes to Black people talking about wanting to focus on their own community, that's an issue. It's almost like some type of ridiculous notion that if we're talking about helping our own community, that means that we're anti everything else. Sorry to burst your bubble, but our focus is on ourselves. It's not on you. That's ridiculous to think that if somebody only wants to help their particular area, that there's an issue with that. There is not. And anybody that has any type of focus area and somebody says that you need to focus on more than just that area, I really wouldn't take their advice as anything but just a dime a dozen, because you really need to make sure in order to help people, you have to really study and focus on the cultural aspects, the norms, the stereotypes, the statistics that are surrounding your particular demographic that you want to work on. And so I am taking it upon myself, even outside of my own curriculum, to really do research. So then that way, when I do go into the field, I'm prepared. Even though I am an African American female, that doesn't mean that I know everything that there is that's happening to African American females or African American males. That's just simply not the case. I mean, you really have to understand that there's all types of ignorance. And so if I sat up here and said being a part of this community meant I know everything about this community, I would be misspeaking and I would be lying. So if you primarily want to focus on children that have ADHD and say you have a child that has ADHD, please don't think that you know it all because you've been through it with your child. Everybody that comes into your office is going to be different. Just because somebody might have a similar disorder or symptoms, that does not mean that they are the same. We are all individuals. Yes, there is a collective understanding for certain demographics, but even within that, you have subcategories. Even in the Black community, we have subcategories of communities. We all have different cultural norms depending on where you're raised. If you have an African American that was raised in the suburbs up against an African American that was raised in a rural area or even in an urban area, if those three people come together, I can pretty much guarantee you there's going to be a lot of similarities, but then there's going to be a lot of dissimilarities where there's going to be a disconnect that happens between each one of them. Because why? They have different ways of doing things, different thought processes, and just overall different people. So I really hope that people just take a minute. And if you're watching this video and you're wanting to go into this field and you're still trying to make a decision, you really need to say, what will be my primary focus? What is the demographic in which I really want to help? And you might not even know. Like I said in my last video, when I first started on this journey to become a mental health counselor, I truly thought that my focus was going to be on helping children that had ADHD. Then I had, and it's still a part of what I want to do, but then I thought, oh, my primary focus is just going to be women that are suffering from trauma and postpartum. But then as I got further, now I'm a year and a half almost into my program and studies and extra studying outside of the classroom, I'm really focused on the African American community. So with that being said, it can actually encompass all of those people that suffer from postpartum trauma, ADHD, all of these factors. But my focus will be for people that are African American, because I really feel like that is my passion, that's my calling, and that's what I want to do. If you're the type of person that says, I want to help everybody no matter what, you're not being truthful with yourself, and you're not being truthful with the future clients that you're going to have. Because if your whole focus is everybody should be treated the same, then this really is not the field for you, because you really have to take people's culture into consideration when you are diagnosing. You have to take in their societal norms, because you don't understand their lifestyle. So that has to be taken into consideration. There are all these microchasms that occur in people's lives that you have to look into. And you can't just say, well, everybody's the same and all lives matter and we should all be treated the same and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, hypothetically in fairyland, that if that's what you want to believe, once again, this is not the field for you. You have to really, there might be times when you are reading certain material and it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Trust me, if you're saying you're going through this process and there has not been a time where you have felt uncomfortable, you're just not getting as much out of it as you could be. Because I had one class, and the book was, it was a cultural class, and the book really actually was very in-depth. It was a new book, and I'll have to remember what book it was. But what it came down to is that it went through a lot of demographics of people. And basically, it talked about white privilege. It talked about the African American community and the statistics that are spread in the media, the rhetoric that negatively impacts the Black community. It talked about the Asian community, about how they are upheld in the education system to be basically the model minority in the U.S., and they're held to a higher standard in education. So that puts a lot of pressure on a lot of Asians and Asian Americans that feel like they have to be meeting some type of criteria that perhaps they can't obtain. That's pressure in and of itself. That creates anxiety and depression, and it just creates a whole circle and spiral down effect. But these aren't things that can be covered if you're just looking at a community and just society as a group, instead of looking at everybody as they are their own individual areas of focus. There was also talking about the Hispanic culture, about how they don't, as society, they really feel like they need to stick together, because in today's climate, a lot of people that are that are immigrants, that are Mexicans especially, are being treated like they can't come to this country, or if they are from this country and they were born in this country, that they don't belong just because their heritage is Mexican. So there are classes that really touch on current events that are happening, and it will make you pull from the news headlines and really make you think. There will be times, just like in my last video, where race will be brought up and somebody will be pissed. Like in the last video where I talked about, I was pissed about the girl that said that she would be upset, or not upset, she would be scared because of an African American male client that was acting irrational, but she really didn't have a rational reason for why she would feel uncomfortable, because in this program, that is a constant theme with these case studies. And an irrational patient did this, an irrational patient did that, an irrational patient did it. Like, that's just the nature of, what we're learning. And yet this one patient, she felt uncomfortable with because he was African American. I mean, it's ridiculous. So there's so many times where you're going to have to face the reality that it's not sunshine and roses, and you have to look and say, what is my purpose for this program? What is my purpose for my career path? What am I going to put forth when I enter into the field? Am I just going to be one of those meek and mealy type people that kind of gets pushed along and put in a position, and I really don't want to do it, and you have no passion for what you're doing? Like, what is your actual passion when it comes to being a therapist? You have to think about that. Some people's passion is dealing with veterans. I have one girl in my program, and that's her whole passion. Like, she is saying that she can't wait. Our school is supposed to get our K-CREP accredited. Especially with dealing with veterans, you have to have graduated from a K-CREP accredited school. So basically, her whole goal is she only wants to deal with veterans that are suffering from PTSD. Now, is somebody going to tell her you can't deal with veterans that are suffering from PTSD? What about the, non-veterans that are suffering from PTSD? Like, that's really rude. They need help too. So you have to sit back and say, okay, I understand that we're going to be learning about all these different groups of people, but in the learning process, what's going to make me feel like I'm really doing my part to make a difference? You can't just sit here and say, I'm going to help everybody. And you can't put yourself into a position where you are wanting to work with a demographic of people so that you don't make other people feel uncomfortable. Like, I have people trolling on my channel talking about I'm racist for only wanting to help the Black community. If there's a white person that sits up here and says they only want to help the white community, I'm going to look at them like, okay, why are you even announcing that? That's a community that's not underserved. And now, if you said you wanted to help a specific type of white community, then go do you. That's fine. But when you start mentioning non-marginalized communities that other marginalized communities need to focus on, you need to do some self-reflection and say, why am I so triggered? Why am I so extra over the top? And why do I feel like what's important to me needs to be important to somebody else? These are things that we really need to look within ourselves and say, am I triggered easily? Am I only triggered when a Black person talks about wanting to help Black people? And if I am, why am I triggered by that? Why am I threatened by that? Why are you threatened by Black people wanting to come together to help one another? Ask yourself that and answer the question yourself, because that's not up for me to care or to hear your answer to that. Because to be perfectly honest, I'm not interested in the back and forth with a demographic of people that are not underserved. You are not underserved. That's just that. There are plenty of white counselors that are out here to serve the white community. What's underserved? There's Asians. There's the lack of Asians that are actually in this field. There's the lack of males that are in this field. There's a lack of Hispanics in this field. There's a lack of Africans. There's a lack of Aboriginals. There's a lack of so many different demographics that are marginalized groups that need to actually be focused on, that aren't being touched. And when these people actually get the courage to go and seek help, they're having a hard time because they don't have anybody that represents their demographic. And even if they go to a counselor that doesn't represent their demographic, that same counselor really has not taken the time to really dissect and understand their culture. So they're going to be treating them as a general factor. They're not really going to understand outside of a textbook what that person is going through. So when I say that when you want to focus on a specific demographic, you need to get out into the field, and not just in the field, but just talk to people, understand their stories, really try and gather information from an authentic standpoint. Don't do it like you're trying to research somebody to write a paper. Do it because you care. If you feel like you're being robotic in your process, that means that that's not your passion, and perhaps you need to do some soul searching and really look and see, what is my passion? What really makes me excited about wanting to be a therapist? If you can't answer that, then you might have picked the wrong program. When I did my undergrad, and if somebody had said, what is your passion about business, marketing, and economics? I might have said the aspect of marketing because I really like just putting things together and putting it out to the masses and getting responses and feedback and watching sales come in from the marketing material that you put out there. But is it like my over the top passion? No. So once again, this program, and hopefully if you're not hopefully if you're in a really good program, you're really taking the time to self-reflect and digest the information that you're doing and reading. A lot of times we get caught up in just kind of writing a paper, doing a test, and doing discussion posts, and we're not really, hold on. You want in? Oh. Sorry about that, guys. I'm sure you saw the cat in the background acting crazy. But you really have to sit back and say, if my program isn't pushing me to think about what my passion is this the right program for me? But you also have to take that onus on yourself and say, I need to do research outside of just the assignments that I'm given. Since I am doing a program online, you really have to be driven and determined on your own steam to continue on. There's nobody that's really pushing you. You're not sitting in a classroom where a teacher, if you're dozing off and they're like, hello, are you awake? Are you there? So you have to really be vested in your future and vested in the future of the people that you say you want to help. So I'm really interested in what's your passion, what demographic you're wanting to serve, and just like and subscribe and share the video. Thanks, guys.